Hello, everyone. This is Megan.
And this is Alana.
And welcome to Tea Time Crimes, a podcast where every week you hear a refined and bold tea review from our expert, Alana.
You know, it tricks you because it sits delicately, but then as it goes down, you can feel the body, and it really lingers.
With the natural pairing of a horrific murder. She murdered at least 14 people.
Ew.
But they still digging. So join us each week to hear the story of a woman through the lens of murder and mayhem, and hear two friends having the time of their lives.
You know I hate true crime, right?
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Anyway, listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Tea Time Crime, out!
1873, Labette County, Kansas. A small one-room home has been abandoned, and almost a dozen dead bodies are found buried nearby. All of them victims of a family of killers known nowadays as the Bloody Benders. The Benders have become the stuff of legend. Their heinous acts became fodder for newspapers and tabloids, not just at the time, but through today. As you can imagine, it can be tough to sift through all the rumors, conjectures, and folklore that came about, but even the stories that might be false don't hold up to what we know to be true. These serial killers were pure evil, and the worst part of their tale is that they got away. This is a study of strange. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Michael May, and joining me is the one, the only, John M. Keating. How you doing, John?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I didn't plan to introduce you that way.
That's why I have to use my middle initial. So
yes, right. John M. So, John, you're an actor, an acting teacher, an acting coach with G. Charles Wright Studios in Los Angeles, and I've told you, hopefully I didn't make you feel uncomfortable when I was like, I want to find a good murder mystery for you.
Oh, no. It's just funny. I became like the czar of murder mysteries.
Yeah, I know. Now, John is a big fan of like Columbo and a lot of old noir movies and stuff like I am as well. So I've been waiting around wanting to find some sort of unsolved murder mystery to have you on, just because I thought it would be fun to kind of look at it from a detective point of view. This is a little different than I hoped, but I was like, I think John might enjoy this one. It's a crazy one.
I definitely do. This is great.
Yeah. So today we are talking about the Bloody Benders, who killed between 11 and 23 people in southern Kansas, depending on what sources you read, in the 1870s. And this was a huge national storyline. Like, press was huge about this at the time when it happened. So it is not an uncommon story. It is very, very popular. There's been documentaries. There's even been some scripted movies. But yeah, it's full of strangeness because the family disappeared. It's a family of serial killers, and they all disappeared. Yeah. No one caught them. And there's a lot of fanciful reports about the Benders and what happened afterwards. And today we're going to talk about some of those, and also what I think most likely happened, because there actually are more reports than a lot of the articles out there would have you believe, so that we do know more facts about the Benders after they were found out to be killers than is commonly talked about. Before we begin, just real quick, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Also, I put out a new series for my Patreon listeners and supporters, so check that out through our website at studyofstrange.com. Thank you for waiting on that, John. You did a good job as I did that.
Oh, yeah. You got to get business out of the way.
You got to get business done. Got to get it done. So let me ask real quick, John, had you heard of the Bloody Benders before I asked you about it?
Not to this extent. I feel like I may have heard like of that kind of genre of the family of serial killers, and so I may have heard something about but not them specifically like that.
Yeah. And you mentioned
it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, and right before we started rolling, you mentioned that it's very much like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And
totally.
It is. It really is. So there might be some influence on some of those types of stories. It's a crazy one. There's a lot to go over, so this might be a two-parter, so I've kind of organized it. However, you never know. We might get through it quick. Who knows? but it's most likely a two-parter. So one of the things I'm going to posit as kind of a theory to think about over these 2 episodes is that I don't think the Benders killed people exactly the way that all the stories describe. Like there's this very famous, which you probably looked at when you just sort of looked it up, about them sneaking up behind somebody with the canvas in front of them and hitting them on the head and then cutting on the throat. Yeah, with the hammer. Some of that is, I think it's partly true, but I don't think that's actually how they killed all their victims for reasons that I'll get into.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start with a certain part of the story and then kind of go backwards. This is like a little prelude or a teaser, if you will. So on May 6th, 1873 in Labette County, Kansas, a group of men, probably dozens of them, are searching for the missing Dr. William York. And they arrive at a cabin which is right on the main trail, the Osage Mission Trail, which is an old Native American trail, and it became kind of like the main highway in the area of the time in this part of Kansas. And Leroy Dick, a local official who is in charge of the search for Dr. York, has been told that there's a cabin that is abandoned and empty, and it is home to the Bender family, what people call the Benders. And apparently this family left it abandoned recently for reasons unknown. And Billy Toll, a farmhand who told Leroy Dick about the desertion of this cabin, is there with the party to search. And they suspect the Benders might be involved with some nefarious murdering activity in the area. So they decide to search this abandoned cabin. And I'm going to quote from my main source today. It's a book from Suzanne Jonas's. It's called Hell's Half Acre, The Untold Story of the Benders, a Serial Killer Family on the American Frontier. So here's a little quote from the story. Inside, a single room is divided by the canvas sheet from a wagon. Dick yanks the makeshift curtain aside and is engulfed in a cloud of filth. It settles to reveal a sparsely furnished living space inhabited by insects that retreat into the crevices at the fall of heavy boots. The cabin has been empty for some time, but it is clear that the occupants left quickly, taking only the essentials needed for travel. Toward the back of the room, the scent of decay is stronger. A Bible with a cracked spine lies discarded near the straw mattress, pulled aside to reveal a trapped door. Or a trapdoor is the proper English of that, instead of trapped door. Grasping the leather strap nailed to the wood as a handle, Dick throws the door open and the smell leaks into the cabin. It sticks to the throats of the search party. Beneath the men, a dark void opens. Silas Toll, Billy's older brother, volunteers to descend. He is a rancher and used to the smell of animal carcasses, but down in the cellar he struggles to breathe. The floor is a slab of sandstone reddened by unnatural stains. When Silas crouches to investigate further, he finds that the soil surrounding the slab is damp. Hoisting himself from the pit, he tells the group that they will have to move the cabin to gain better access to the cellar, that there is definitely something buried beneath the slab. And thank you for bearing with me with that long little section there, John. But I like the setup that they find this abandoned cabin and there's terrible smells and blood.
Oh yeah, it's the opening of a movie. I mean, it is
absolutely,
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And the we're going to have to there's something buried under the slab is such an ominous sentence.
Yes, indeed. And this is a tale. This tale is grotesque. It is macabre and it's weird and people are still trying to understand it today, including us today. So let's start at the beginning of this craziness that led to that moment of searching. This goes back, I think 3 years. I think it's 1870. Kansas at the time in 1870, it's a rugged place. And I don't just mean the landscape. I mean culturally too. During the Civil War, just before this, there were the bushwhackers, primarily in Missouri, but they would fight in Kansas a lot. They were pro-slavery. Then there's the Jayhawkers, which if you know your Kansas sports, everybody, you know them.
Totally, yeah.
And they were abolitionists, and they were primarily in Kansas, and they got caught up in all the fighting. After the war, after all of this brutal fighting, now these people there's a lot of them are still around. They're living amongst each other. There's a lot of emotions. People in America are generally moving out and migrating west at this point through Missouri and Kansas and Oklahoma and all these kind of places. And there's a lot of thieves and robbers and murderers and con men. And they're all trying to survive. Also, in the decades leading up to this, there was famously the Trail of Tears, where Native Americans were shipped out of their homes and sent to the Oklahoma Territory. And that is on the border of southern Kansas, where our story takes place today. And outlaws exploited the proximity of this border to escape, whether it's like stealing stuff and then you hightail it down into Indian territory to get away from any potential law enforcement. Now, all that said, homesteading is going on. So they're allowed or able to purchase for very little money a large plot of land. And if they cultivate it and build on it for a certain period of time, they get to keep the land forever. It's theirs. This is a huge part of the westward expansion of the United States history. So on an October morning in 1870, 2 men arrived at the Osage Township in southern Kansas. And this is near today where the town of Cherryvale is. I think it was set up actually during this story. And there was a little cabin here, which was a trading post. And 2 men ran the trading posts, and their names were Edward Earn and Rudolph Brockman. And they're sitting outside, apparently, hanging out. And these two men show up on a carriage. And one is in his 20s, and he introduced himself as John Gephardt. And the older man was around 60, and he was John Bender. And the assumption is that the 2 men were related, but no one actually seems to have inquired about their relationship, whether they were related by blood, by marriage. No one knows, even still to this day, no one knows. Now, Gephardt, in common tellings, is referred to as John Bender Jr., and there's a lot of claims saying that they didn't find out his name was Gephardt until after the murders were discovered. That doesn't actually seem to be true. He actually introduced himself as John Gephardt at the time. He also seems to have introduced himself as John Bender to some people. So it's just really strange, this family.
And there's a lot of that coming up. There's
lot of that. There's tons. There's a whole, through both parts, there's a lot of these things. Yeah. When in the second part, when I get into the press that happened immediately after, the descriptions of people are all over the place.
Yeah.
So both these guys had German accents. John Bender, as I'll refer to him, the Pa, as they call him sometimes, he had a very thick German accent and apparently could not really speak English. And he was also incredibly unfriendly and brutish and mean. A lot of the descriptions call him very hairy. Like I imagine a big, brute Bigfoot sort of creature.
Yes.
A lot of the
suit, if you will.
Yeah, there you go. He definitely had a hairsuit. This guy is a walking hairsuit for sure. And John Gephardt was kind of skinny. He had like a narrow face. Apparently his eyes were like too close together. And he had this really annoying laugh where he would be like, oh, yes. Except he had a German accent. So that's a terrible impression. But
they sound like the side characters in a Disney movie.
They totally are.
Right? Or like Pirates of the Caribbean. Like they're the two.
They're
the 2 Mackenzie Crook and the other guy, pirates that are like not the main ones. But.
You got to have like the skinny one and the chubby one.
The skinny one and the chubby one. 101 Dalmatians.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Yep. They absolutely are. And they allegedly were moving in from Pennsylvania, which actually does make sense because we don't know if they really did move in from Pennsylvania. But if they're German, Pennsylvania Dutch, even my ancestors were Pennsylvania Dutch. They immigrated into Pennsylvania. So it actually makes sense. They may have been from Pennsylvania. And so the gentleman Earn, showed these 2 German guys around to the various plots that they might be interested in town. And they picked one out that was perfect for travelers because it's literally right on the Osage Mission Trail. So it's right on the highway of its time. But it was sort of sunken low between some mounds and hills that are still there today where people can't really see the cabin. There's some privacy in the otherwise sort of flat, sparse Kansas terrain.
Kansas, yeah.
Yeah.
Not known for its hilly
No,
landscape.
Not at all. Known more for its tornadoes and taking people up inside of tornadoes. Now, what I didn't know until researching is that John Bender, he is the one that purchased the plot. It was 160 acres that the cabin was on. And Gephardt actually purchased his own plot, which was kind of nearby. It was a narrow strip that was a bit, I think it had more trees and stuff on it. He never built anything on it. He never did anything with the land. So some people suspect that it was for more privacy in the area, which I totally buy. Now, when the man got the land, they kind of quickly paced out the cabin in the ground. They literally took their feet and like drew a line. It was like, here's the cabin. Whatever. They used sticks to kind of draw things out. And then they built their own cabin because that's what men did back then, John.
Yes.
What do we do with our lives now?
We're podcasting. That's what we do.
I am not a man like they were back then.
I can't. Yeah. I mean, I don't like people make bread. I don't know how they do that. I just buy it.
Yeah. Bread is hard. I've actually tried to make bread. It is not easy. Yeah, they were doing all that. So they built a 16 by 24 cabin with 9-foot ceilings. There was a door at each end. Some stories say there's only a front door, but there actually was a front and a back door. There was what is always called a trap door to the basement. It's not a trap door. It's just a little thing you lift up.
It's like a hatch.
It's a hatch. They did cover it and hide it, but it's not a trap door. And they built the cabin really quickly because winter is a coming when they're moving in 1870. Over the period of months after that, they planted an orchard behind the house. They also built sort of a stable, a corral for animals right there. They also dug a well. And allegedly, when they first moved in, Gebhardt would make money by taking stolen horses across the border. I don't know how to confirm that. That's just one of those stories that comes up with tales of the time. And the men nailed a sign out front that said groceries, but they spelled groceries Grocrys. I mean, English may not be their first language, so it makes sense. And so, yeah, they planned to sell some goods to make some money along the trail. Now, apparently, John Bender when they opened up shop and they started having customers, stop on their travels to buy things, John Bender was unfriendly. There's much worse ways to describe it. He was a very unfriendly dude and sometimes wouldn't even help potential customers. And he also didn't speak English, which doesn't help, but he never really tried. In March of 1871, the Bender boys were joined by the lady folk, Kate Bender, or Katie sometimes, in her early 20s, and Ma Bender. She's sometimes referred to as Almira or Elvira Bender. I will explain that in part 2. No one actually knows her name. They just refer to her as Ma. No one actually knows her real name, and that is the truth. The book I read, my main source, this is the only place I ever saw this. It says that they came from Ottawa, the women, which I was like, can I get more information on that? And there wasn't. It just said they came from Ottawa. And I was like, that's weird because the guys came from Pennsylvania. Yeah. The women are coming from Ottawa. I don't know. It's a very interesting detail I wish I knew more about, because that might explain some of why the Benders are the way they are. Because we don't know. We don't know why they were as crazy as they are. So Ma Bender, similar to Pa Bender, spoke very little English, very heavy accent. She did know more English than she let on, but she didn't know it very well. And she was considered a she-devil, is what a lot of people called her. She was also just as unfriendly as the hair suit man known as Pa Bender. And Kate, or Katie, I'll probably refer to her as Kate, but she went by both. She did have a little bit of a German accent, apparently, but she spoke very good English, not as much of a German accent as the other guys.
And Kate came with Ma, right?
That's right. Yeah, they came together.
She was not born of Ma and Pa Bender, right?
No, people assume that if they are related, she's most likely Ma's daughter. But again, no one knows. No one knows if this entire family is a real family at all. We have no confirmations of any of that.
And it is interesting that they're German, but coming through Ottawa.
Right. Because isn't Ottawa primarily, I would imagine, French speaking at the time? I don't know enough about Canada, but I think so. Now, around the time that Kate and Ma showed up, they started kind of running their business model they landed on, which is accepting guests at the cabin, not just for groceries, but also to make a warm meal, give people a place to sleep out of the elements for the night, because you have all these travelers. There are no motels at the time. So you just stop at someone's house to stay the night. There's no guest room. This is all one big room separated by that canvas sheet. So it's probably a chair, or you put your saddle on the ground with a blanket, and that's where you sleep. And that's primarily how the Benders tried to make money. Now, the word about town is that Ma and Pa did not socialize. They would stay at the house and do chores around the house. They would every now and then go into town or a township to buy supplies, but they didn't really talk to people. And again, they were really terrible at socializing. They were not good people. And so Kate and John, it was up to them to kind of socialize in town. And they did. They went to church. They went to Sunday school. Kate worked at a hotel and eventually a couple other jobs as well. So they were more well-known amongst the town folk at the time, and they were considered much nicer. But there are periods of time where their oddities, their eccentricities would come across to the locals and they rub them the wrong way. Like Kate was apparently a healer and a spiritualist and would hold seances and admit that but suggest that she could heal all sorts of abnormalities. And she would push people a little too hard for that kind of business. She was an aggressive car salesman. And John, again, had that irritating, not you, John, but John Gephardt had the irritating laugh that made people think that he might be stupid. Like there might be some sort of mental disability at the time. I think one of the quotes from a source back then is calling him a half-wit, which definitely sounds like a 19th century.
That's what passes as a mental health diagnosis back in the early 19th century.
Indeed. So here's where something strange begins to happen. Ern, who is the guy that showed the Bender boys around for claims, he was bought out of his business, out of the trading post. And so he took that money that he earned and he sent it overseas to pay for his fiance and her mother to move to the States, I think from Germany. So they're making the trek over. And when you travel and make big moves back then, everything you own comes with you. there's no FedEx, there's no storage facilities, there's no banks. Well, there are banks, but they're not everywhere and they're not very accessible.
I'll just buy a couch when I get there. Like,
exactly.
Everything's coming with you.
So everything's coming with them, and Ern set it up so that they could stay at the Bender cabin when they arrived to town for a little bit. So they arrived to town, they're staying with the Benders, and one day the entire Bender family suggests to the fiance and her mother, we should go on a long walk. And they were like, oh, that sounds lovely. So they all go out to walk. And the two older Benders at one point are like, we're not feeling well, or we're old. I don't know. They came up with some excuse. They turned around and left the younger group to keep walking. And when the younger group made it back to the cabin, a jewelry box was gone, as well as all their cashier's checks. I don't know how much money the cashier's checks added up to, but it had to be, again, probably everything they had.
Yeah.
And they were gone. And nothing else is gone, by the way. Those are the things that are gone. So the family immediately blames the Benders. They think they've been had and they've been stolen from by the Benders. And so they're very upset about it. And John Gephardt is like, it's horse thieves. It's horse thieves. It happens around these parts. They're horse thieves. You shouldn't stay here. It's too dangerous because they might still be around. So he takes the ladies to some other family nearby and has them stay somewhere else. Ern, of course, finds out about this. He actually threatens the Benders, shows up at the cabin with a gun and like holds it to the Benders and is like, I demand to have the jewelry box and the checks. Give them to me. I know you have them. They decline. They play dumb and stupid and like, we don't know what you're talking about. It's so sad. And he realizes wisely, he can't really do anything because there's no evidence. So he threatened them, didn't get anything out of it. So that's all he could do, put his gun away, and he's left. By 1871, in this same year, this is all happening, the cabin became what we all know it to be from all the tales, because it didn't always look the same. They obviously planted the orchard, which was growing. They may not have even had the canvas separator right away. That may have taken a time before they did that. And very famously, there is this white canvas that hung in the middle of the cabin to separate the living quarters for all the Benders, all of them in one little spot, and the front area for cooking, eating. There's a table that had two benches. It's always in pictures, they always draw chairs, but it actually apparently is two benches. And one side faced the door with the canvas right behind it. And that's very important for the story.
Yes.
And one thing, I don't know how important this is for the story, but I love these kind of inconsistencies when you research things. Apparently the canvas, according to one account, was not white. It was a red calico curtain and not a white canvas. And this is where I like to say on this show, both can be true. It's not like, oh, we proved it wrong. They might have switched it out at one point, or maybe they rotated it. Maybe they cleaned them. There are
I'm
a lot
sure
of
the
stories.
white one gets dirty every once in a while.
And there are reports that it's like stained And I think those reports are from all the press articles that came out that are mostly making up stories that like, because some people are like, oh, stained with blood. And I'm like, that would just scare away customers. I don't think they just left blood on the canvas. Yeah. So
here, have some dinner and sit right by the blood-stained canvas.
Put your head right there by the blood mark. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, which is one of my theories of why I don't think they were attacked the way everybody thinks they were attacked. However, apparently they were very dirty. Like, there's a lot of comments on like dirty dishes and bugs and stuff like that.
A lot of negative Yelp reviews.
Yes. Oh, yes. The Yelp reviews are not good.
But this will be reflected in my Yelp review.
And the Benders didn't care because there's no other business nearby that does the same thing. So they're like, yeah, leave a bad Yelp review. We don't care. Kate was she was very interested in her spiritualism practice, her business of healing. I think she would have much rather just been telling fortunes and telling people she can cure blindness than kill people. That's my own assumption. She did market and advertise her services all around the area. So I'm going to read one because it's fun. So it says, Professor Miss Katie Bender can heal all sorts of diseases, can cure blindness, fits, deafness, and all such diseases. Also deaf and dumbness. Residence 14 miles east of Independence on the road from Independence to Osage Mission, 1.5 miles southeast of Nora Head Station. Katie Bender, June 18th, 1872. Yeah, I love that stuff. I love fits. Fits, yeah.
That covers so many things.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, spiritualism, I'm not going to go into, but people can listen to my William Mumler series to learn a little bit more about it. Spiritualism is a huge belief / religion at the time where people thought they could talk to dead people. And Katie is not the only spiritualist in the area. It was very, very prominent, including one story from a woman named Julia Hessler, who was a friendly medium. She would hold seances around the area with Kate Bender sometimes. And one night, Kate invited Julia to come to the cabin for a seance. This is where our first scene comes in, John. You excited?
I'm very excited.
Okay. So scene one, do you care who you read? Which part do you want to read?
No, let me pull it up here a second.
So it's the first scene.
Oh, God, I'm open to whatever casting decisions.
Let's have you do Julia.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I'm not going to try to do a German accent because I will be terrible for Kate. All right. So here we go. So it's a brisk night, and Julia Hester knocks on the door of the Bender cabin. Kate Bender opens the door and gestures for Julia to enter. Julia notices a small fire in a stove and 2 candles lit on a table in the center of the room. A dirty canvas hangs behind the table, separating the room in 2.
Good evening, Kate. Thank you for inviting me.
Sit. Julia begins to sit down on one of the benches at the table. Not there. Sit facing the door. It's much more comfortable.
All right.
Julia takes a seat with her back against the canvas. I'm very excited you've come. Let's get started. Kate blows out the candles, and the room, which was already barely lit, is now exceptionally dark except for bits of light from the stove casting strange shadows across the walls. Close your eyes.
Where's the rest of your family?
They don't partake in seances. Kate reaches for Julia's hands. Now, close your eyes. Kate closes her eyes and Julia begins to close hers, but a swarming fly swoops across her face and she pulls a hand away from Kate's to swat at it. Come now, it's just a gnat. Kate grabs Julia's hands again and they both close their eyes. Those from the spirit world we wish to communicate. Spirits, we offer ourselves as vessels. Julia notices a creaking sound. She tries to ignore it. Kate begins to make a strange humming sound. Hum. Julia hears another creak and opens her eyes. Behind Kate, lit by the faint flickers of the fire from the stove, stands Ma, Pa, and John Gephardt. They are staring silently at Julia.
Oh!
Julia pulls her hands away from Kate. Don't worry about them. Stay focused. Kate tries to grab Julia's hands.
I have to excuse myself. Sorry, the outhouse? I have to use the When nature calls. I'll be right back.
Julia stands and swiftly manages to skate around the Bender family and exit. As she does so, she begins to run. Pa Bender grabs a rifle and aims it at Julia, but she's hard to track in the dark night. As she runs, Pa fires the gun into the air as Julia disappears into the fields. John Gebhardt giggles while Kate Bender slaps Pa on the arm. I'm unhappy with how the night played out. You should probably do a John Gebhardt giggle, too. Give your best take. Perfect. Nailed it. So yes, that was our first scene. There'll be another one in part 2. So this is a story that I read in, again, my primary source for the evening, that I was just a little fascinated by, because it really paints a picture of what the Bender family was like. And we don't know if they were planning to kill her that night, but it's definitely suspect that they grabbed a rifle.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that they were just there staring at her.
Yeah.
While her eyes were supposed to be closed.
Yes. Now, one thing this is not a way to defend the Benders by any means. So hopefully it doesn't come across that way. But this story, I don't think people knew this story until after the Benders were discovered to have been murderers. So it's not like she ran to town and was like, oh my God, that family, they were trying to shoot me. It was really weird. They tricked me into coming. It could be some sort of embellishment. However, Julia was known to be, doing seances with Kate. So there is some validity to this story.
It could have been like one of those I was there stories.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Like, oh, she's just been there for the seance, but oh no, then they tried to kill me too, but I got away.
Yeah. And God, there's a lot of those even today. So there's a little side tangent, but when I research, I hate comments on videos and articles and stuff, but I find when I'm doing these stories, it's actually really helpful to read through, because every now and then someone will be like, oh, did you see this link? Or, oh, I actually read that, you'll find more information that you're not going to normally find. And still to this day, I think there's some on Reddit, there's some on some YouTube documentaries I watched about them. There are people that's like, oh, my grandfather told me a story about his grandfather that went down and shot the Benders. And there's so many of those tales. And it's a lot of these, I knew them. And we will cover more of those in part 2, actually, because there's quite a number. It's really fascinating. So I'm not sure when the Bender family actually started killing. It could have been right away, and we just don't know. But I do think most likely because of when people started to be found or go missing, I do think it may be late 1871. And we do have some details of victims of the Benders, not everybody, but I will cover some of them today, starting with late 1871, right around the holiday season, like today when we're recording this. Oh, that's creepy. A gentleman named James Farrick and his wife, Mary, had a young son. And Mary and the son were going to go visit family in New York. And James was going to stay behind and build the family home in this area of Kansas. And so Mary and the son, they depart for New York for a number of months, because back then, when you left for a long period of time.
Yeah, you weren't just going out. Yeah, for a bit and popping by.
And so the plan was, build the home so when they return months later, there is a home for them to live in. So as soon as they leave, James sets off along the Osage Mission Trail. And it's likely he was carrying most, if not all, of the family's money at the time. And Mary and her son arrive in New York, and they write a letter back to Kansas, and they never get a response. Now, at some point in time, I don't know how long, but after she's not getting any responses from James, she gets a letter from a family friend from the area in Kansas that say they have not seen or heard from James since he left along the trail. Now, right around this time as well, this is when Kate begins kind of working in town. She's doing her spiritualism stuff. She's doing her seances. And people are starting to, that negative Yelp review thing is starting to pass around. Like the Bender family has now been there for about a year. There's a lot of tales of them either treating people poorly, treating guests poorly, Ma and Pa being just really terrible people. And Kate Kate would be like very flirtatious to men one minute, and then days or minutes later, she would be complete 180 and be really rude to them and standoffish. And I wanted to say this just because I'm trying to paint the picture of their personalities, because they are So strange, hence a study of strange. Now, there are a lot of these sort of anecdotal things about their personalities are rumors. Again, it's I knew them. I saw the thing when it happened. That's where a lot of these come from. However, because they're all similar, I think that we can actually be like, yeah, Kate was probably very flirtatious one minute and then really rude the next. John probably was super weird. And Ma and Pa were probably really unfriendly because everybody says that. So there's a commonality to all these stories. So there's also a tale from the same book that I wanted to share just because, again, it's very interesting and scary. A priest named Ponziglione, I think that's how you say that, was traveling in the area and he was raising money for a mission. And so he stopped at the cabin because that's where he was told you can get a warm meal and stuff like that. And Kate got really excited when she asked him what he was doing, and he explained he's raising money for a mission. And the priest noticed after he started telling his story that the men who were in the cabin suddenly disappeared. He never heard them leave. He didn't know where they went, excuse me. And he asked Kate, like, "Oh, where are, where are the guys?" And she gave some sort of like vague answer, and she was making him coffee, and apparently she was acting really bizarre. She's like glancing around the room, her eyes are darting around, and she's putting a lot of focus onto the second half of the room behind the canvas. And it just rubs the priest the wrong way. And when she sat down with his coffee, he jumped up and made an excuse and left. And part of what makes this really dramatic is there was a huge storm. That's why he stopped there, was to get out of this huge storm. And now he ran off into the storm to get away from the Benders. So that's another interesting story. In October of 1872, a dead body was found by two kids in a river called Drum Creek. And the body had a blunt force trauma to the head and also a neck wound, like a cut. And it was assumed by authorities that the body was there about 6 days. And the body was later identified as a man named William Jones, and he was traveling the Osage Mission Trail for work. And his wife claims that he had hundreds of dollars on him. Locals thought that the guy that owned the land that his body was found on must have done it. This is very like investigating the 1870s. Oh, it's your land. You did it.
Yeah.
And this guy was named R.M. Bennett, and he was actually arrested for this murder. And he noticed, he was Columboing himself, that there was this interesting track left by a wagon that was near where the body would have been dumped in the creek. And the track of the wagon meant like one of the wheels was jutted out. And he was like, look at all my wagons. I don't know how many he had. Maybe he only had one. But he was like, look at my wagon or more. I don't have any wagons that have wheels like that. And so they looked at him and were like, okay, yeah, you're right. And we have no other evidence. So you're free to go. So luckily he was not.
It's kind of like the early version of like the tire treads.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
The Benders, I will point out, were not suspects. They were not suspects for any of these murders or disappearances for quite a while. And that is because life was tough. Like that, it's a place where a lot of people are going missing for sometimes just very natural reasons. But again, there's other thieves and robbers and murderers and con men. There's also right across the border into Oklahoma territory. It's all where all the Native American tribes are. And they, rightly so, don't always get along with the westward expansion of white people moving through the area. So there are, some violent interactions that can happen. So a man named Benjamin Brown came through the area, and he traded horses with somebody at Ladore, another nearby town or settlement, and then he disappeared. His wife actually went looking for him, knowing no one else is going to look for the guy, so I've got to go do it too. And she actually stayed the night at the Bender cabin along her search for her husband, which is just super scary. Now that we know that, she didn't know that.
Now that you know, yeah, exactly.
A man named William McCroddy, who was a war veteran, disappeared on his way to a land office. He stopped at the Bender cabin, it's assumed, because right before he disappeared, he talked to a guy and said, "Where can I stop to get some food?" And they said, "Oh, go to the Bender cabin." That was the last person to ever see him alive. Around Christmas, this would be of 1872, a man's body was found, which had been practically eaten entirely by wild hogs. He was able to be identified because of his clothing. He was a guy named John Phipps. And his family said he also was traveling with a lot of money. So you'll notice here that some people had been found dumped. The guy in the creek and now Phipps. And this is all about to change. And I think it's about to change because word is getting around that there's dead bodies being found. And that makes people suspicious of a lot of things.
Well, especially since that, and the last people to see them was the Bender cabin.
The Bender, exactly. So I think the Benders, they are both incredibly stupid and try to do something a little smarter, which is we're not going to dump bodies. We should bury everybody for a little more privacy.
I mean, they got 168 acres. You might as well.
Yes, you got the land.
Use some of it.
Yeah. So the saddest story is the one that happens next, and that's a gentleman named George Longcore. His name is misspelled or spelled different ways in different articles and things, but I think that's just the product of the time, and not everybody knew how to spell it. He was traveling to Iowa in December of 1872. Now, he and his wife, Mary Jane, they had a daughter who was 18 months old at the time named Mary Ann, and the mother had actually passed away due to complications with childbirth. So George Longcore, unsure of how to raise a daughter on his own, befriends a Dr. William York. And Dr. William York has a family. Mary Ann, his daughter, gets along with the family. So the York family actually helps take care of this little girl. Until one day, the in-laws, George Longcore's in-laws, actually write to him, are like, look, Mary Ann should come live with us. We're family. If you need help with her, send her up to us. And he agrees to do that. So he actually buys a carriage from Dr. York and travels through Kansas, where he lives, along the Osage Mission Trail with his 18-month-old daughter, and they never make it to Iowa. Now, a couple days after Longcore left, a man named John Hanley stopped by the Bender cabin with a colleague. They were just looking to warm up. I don't think they were planning to stay the night. And the Benders seemed uninterested in having a guest at the time. Like, they were really standoffish, and he wanted to light a fire, and they were like, no. And he's like, well, I'll buy the firewood. And they're like, no. And so it suggested that they were being really kind of rude and wanting him to leave, probably because they still had George Longcore and his daughter's body, maybe even in the cabin, maybe in the cellar.
Sure.
So that's the
trying to
suggestion.
Figure out what to do with it.
Mm-hmm. This is the first step towards the Benders being found out. So they should not have done what they should have done, which is just a terrible comment, because they shouldn't have done any of this, John. What am I saying?
Right.
They should not have done any of this. So months later, after Longcore goes missing, Dr. William York, his buddy, the person who helped raise his daughter for a period of time, he had been a Civil War vet. He was a bit of a hero in the Civil War. He had also been a prisoner of war during the Civil War, which is just, the stories I've heard about that are just pure hell. And he went to visit his brother, Alexander York, because George Longcore is missing. And Dr. William York wasn't sure what to do and wanted some help. And not only had York not received word that Longcore had made it to his family in Iowa, but there was a wagon was also found, and that was crashed, and something, obviously it had been abandoned or something, and it had a wardrobe, clothing from a man and probably an 18-month-old girl. So William York went to see the wagon wherever it was found and was like, oh shit, that's my wagon. That's the one he sold George Longcore. So he knew something happened to him. So he went to his brother, like I said, Alexander. Alexander is a former Kansas State senator, very recently Kansas State senator at the time. He was very well respected, very powerful, very interesting guy in Kansas, knew how to push a lot of buttons and get a lot of things done.
Sure.
And there's a story about him that I have to share just because it kind of shows how kind of interesting and cool he is. So he was no longer a state senator because he accepted a bribe, but he accepted a bribe to prove that another senator was paying bribes. So he kind of like threw away his own career as a senator just to get the other guy out of the Senate. So yeah, he tricked a guy by accepting a bribe, and he actually went to the Senate floor and showed proof that he accepted a bribe. He's like, I accepted a bribe. Here's the proof. It came from that man, that senator there, that scumbag who we all know is a scumbag. So they had to kick them both out of the Senate. And I actually
that's pretty amazing, like, way to stand up for your principles.
Yeah. It's like, I'm
putting your money where your mouth is, literally.
Absolutely. Right? So I actually want to read part of his speech on the Senate floor because it's so cool. And also, I just love the language back then that people use.
Oh, sure.
So here he goes. This is Alexander York on the state Senate floor. I know that there are many present who may feel disposed to impugn my motives in this matter and decry the manner of my unearthing the deep and damning rascality which has eaten like a plague spot into the fair name of this glorious young state. I am conscious that standing here as I do, a self-convicted bribe-taker, I take upon myself vicariously the odium that has made the name of Kansas and Kansas politics a hissing and byword throughout the land. So he's not a senator anymore, but people love him for what he did.
Of course.
He is both feared and respected. And William tells his brother Alexander that he's going to actually go search for George Longcore himself. And he's going to start by traveling the same path that Longcore traveled. And so he gets in his probably horse and buggy or carriage of some kind, and he heads on down the Osage Mission Trail. And he soon, too, went missing. And his brother Alexander gets worried that now Dr. William York, his brother, is missing. He never showed up. So Alexander is like, something's going on in that area. So I need to figure this out. And there's somebody I trust, my other brother, their youngest brother, Edward York. He calls in Ed and says, get a detective, get a team together. We got to go find out what happened to our brother, Dr. William York. And in certain respects, they did find out what happened to Dr. William York. He, too, met the Bloody Benders. And that is where we're going to end part 1, John, is with the hunt for whatever happened to Dr. William York. And next week, we're going to conclude the story of the Bloody Benders, what investigators found, what they didn't, and the details of the Benders' escape from Kansas and into, I don't know, infamy? Are they infamous?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they're like it's like folklore legend. Almost.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is. And now I'm thinking about Infamous and the Three Amigos. Infamous? He's infamous? Yeah. So, Dr. William York, to surmise, his disappearance leads to the downfall of the Benders directly because the York bros are on the case. And it is not pretty. And we're going to get kind of more macabre in part 2 as we find out all the details of the crazy Bloody Benders. John, since we are breaking this up in 2, do you want to plug anything here at the end of this? And we'll do it again at part 2. Like where can people find you or what you do?
They can find me. My website is johnmkeatingacting.com. I do acting. I do audition classes and I do audition coaching as well. You can book an audition coaching with me through there or find out more information on the classes. I'll plug my movie, Concessionaires Must Die, which is available on iTunes and Amazon. I believe it's on Plex now as well.
Oh, cool.
And possibly Tubi. It was on Tubi for a while. It's a comedy that I co-wrote and that I'm in. Stan Lee is in it. And Dan Lauria from Wonder Years. It's about the last days of a single screen movie theater. So yeah,
it is very good. Everybody, please check that out. And I look forward to seeing everybody back for part 2. Thank you for listening to part 1 of Bloody Benders. Visit our website, astudyofstrange.com. You'll find information about our Patreon. We would love to have you on there to listen to the content on Patreon and support the show. Find us on Instagram at astudyofstrange. You can also message me at astudyofstrange@gmail.com. And on the email note, I am compiling personal UFO stories for an upcoming future episode. So if you have any UFO experiences, I would love to have you on the show. Email me, astudyofstrange@gmail.com. Would love to hear about it. I'm trying to remember if I have any other announcements. I don't think so. Not that I can think of. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. And I look forward to concluding Bloody Benders with you next week. Thank you, and good night.